I closed our Rotterdam logistics deal and drove straight to my parents' place to pick up my '69 Mustang. The garage door rolled up, and there was nothing but air where my dream should have been. Before we start, tap subscribe for more justice-driven family stories and quiet revenge arcs. I'm Daphne, and this is how my parents sold my dream car for my brother, and how I made him repay every cent. The sun was doing that late afternoon thing where it turns the neighborhood gold, glazing the edges of the mailboxes and the trimmed hedges like they'd been dipped in honey. I eased the rental into the familiar driveway, muscles aching from the flight, brain still ticking through the Rotterdam milestones. Signatures obtained, penalties waived, rail capacity secured. The kind of win that restructures a quarter. I killed the engine and stepped out, smoothing the creases in a blazer that had served as armor through 30 hours of meetings and 6 cups of espresso. My mother had texted, "Come by before you go home. I made something for dinner." I knew what that meant. She wanted details she could repeat to relatives like a monologue she'd memorized. She'd clap in the right places. She wouldn't really see me. That was okay. I've lived on my own recognition for years. I dug the garage remote out of my bag. One press. The motor whirred up, the door rolled, and the sound echoed into a space that should have been full of scent and color. Fuel, leather, black paint catching light. Instead there was a blank concrete mouth. No long hood. No glint of chrome. No Mustang. My stomach dropped so fast I had to catch myself on the door frame. For a second my brain tried to rationalize. Wrong garage? Oh. Someone moved it? Why would anyone? The remote slipped from my hand and skittered across the floor. I stepped into the empty, the echoes of my shoes clapping back at me like applause for a bad joke. And then I cut through to the side door and into the kitchen. They were already seated as if they'd rehearsed their marks. My mother at the head with her tea towel twisted in both hands, my father with his elbows on the table and his calloused fingers flat, and Lucas lounging like a lifestyle ad jawline for days, wrist glittering with a watch he couldn't possibly afford without a sponsor, a pair of sunglasses perched on his head despite the fact that we were indoors and it was not 2009. "Daphne, honey," my mother said, voice too sweet, the sound people use when they've already done the thing and can't undo it. "Let's all take a breath before anyone overreacts. Where's my car?" My voice came out clean. I was grateful for that. Calm sounds like leverage. Lucas straightened, trying on confidence. "It's temporary," he said. "Think of it as a bridge. Once the boutique opens, it'll be fine." "What boutique?" I asked. "And where is my Mustang?" My father's eyes slid to the sideboard, to the little white chip in the wood he's been meaning to sand for 9 years. He cleared his throat like he was starting an engine on a cold morning. "Harborview Title and Pawn," he said. It's a loan. 46,000. Plus fees. It was a good rate. The room tilted. I pressed my palm to the back of a chair to steady the angle of the world. "You did what?" "It's not a sale," Lucas said quickly, a salesman's cadence slipping into place. "It's collateral. We had to move fast because the Harlow and King location came free on Front Street and there's serious foot traffic. Once I launch, I'll pay it back with interest and then some. You'll get the car back better than new. We're talking signature candles, capsules, drops." "Stop," I said, because my heart was beating in my ears and because words are currency and Lucas spends them like confetti. "You had no right to touch it. You used my spare key. You used my title." My mother bristled. "Family helps family. You make a very good salary, Daphne. Your brother needs a chance. You've had plenty of..." "Of what?" I asked, turning to her. "Plenty of being told to be the reasonable one? Plenty of being asked to understand? You didn't ask. You took." My phone buzzed in my pocket, a neutral little vibration that somehow sounded like a judge clearing a throat. I glanced down. Insurance. New lien recorded on vehicle. The kind of message that takes the wind from your lungs. I looked back up and everything in me that wanted to scream rolled itself into a tight, cold coil instead. "That is identity theft and title fraud," I said, enunciating each word so it would land. "You forged my signature." My father flinched, a wince that made him look older, a man who'd built a life on honest labor suddenly sitting in a mess with his name on it. "We were going to tell you," he muttered. "It's only for a month. The auction window is 30 to 35 days. I finished for him because I read pawnbroker regulations when I chose where to store something precious. Full payoff due before auction. After that it's gone. Silence pressed against the cabinets. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and then decided against it. I let the quiet expand until I could hear my own breath steady. "You have 30 days, I said, to get my car back. In my name. Keys in my hand. Or I press charges. Not an empty threat. Real charges. Against you." My mother's face rearranged itself into horror. "Daphne. Against your own family?" "Family doesn't steal," I said. "Family asks." I turned to Lucas. "You're going to repay every cent, down to the last processing fee, because this debt is yours. Not mine." He lifted his chin, a flicker of indignation flashing there, the part of him that believes in miracles he hasn't worked for. "You don't understand retail cycles," he said weakly. "There are seasons and momentum and—" "What I understand," I said, "is cash flow, interest accrual, auction schedules, and the difference between a plan and a mood board." The old house ticked, with settling around us like an exhale. I thought about the first time I laid a hand on the Mustang's fender after the paint cured, the way the black ate the light and gave it back in a thin silver line. I thought about the hours in that garage, grease under my nails, Uncle Rafi showing me the dance between torque and patience. "Dreams are just work you refuse to abandon," he'd said, handing me a rag like a benediction. I pulled my keys from the counter and slid them into my bag. 30 days, I repeated, not loud, not dramatic, just final. If that car isn't back, I file. If a single penny of principal or fees is missing, I file. If Harborview so much as breathes about an auction schedule, I file. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Lucas's jaw tightened into a line someone could slice a lemon on. I walked to the side door, the way out that had let me come and go my whole teenage life without waking anyone. The wallpaper in the mudroom was the same pattern of little blue vines it had always been. My fingers found the old nick in the doorframe where we measured heights, Lucas always pulling his hair straight up to cheat an inch. He used to look at me the way people look at lighthouses. Somewhere along the way he started mistaking me for a dock. Solid, useful, ignorable. I stepped into the evening air, warm and clean. The garage door was still open, that yawning rectangle framing empty concrete like a dare. It would haunt me if I let it. I clicked the remote. The door rolled down, slatted shadow sliding over the void until it disappeared and I could stop seeing what wasn't there. In the driver's seat of the rental, I allowed myself one breath that trembled, one slick swipe under both eyes with the side of my hand, then I set my shoulders as if they had weight plates on them and started the engine. 30 days, I told myself, merging into the slow river of Maple Street. 30 days to get back metal and paint, and something harder to repossess. Respect. Boundaries. The keys to my own life on a ring that no one else would touch again. 30 days. Starting now. The next morning I walked into Harborview Title and Pawn with a manila folder under my arm and a face that said I had slept on spreadsheets instead of a pillow. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, which felt obscene. The place smelled like citrus air freshener and regret, coin albums under glass, a trumpet with a dented bell rings lined up like apologies. The clerk wore a plastic nameplate that said Gordon. He had the look of someone who had taught himself not to flinch at other people's emergencies. "Morning," he said. "How can I help you?" "You can start by printing every document connected to a 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback that was pledged here last week," I said, laying my ID on the counter so we could skip the dance about who I was. "Title numbers on file. The loan was for $46,000. Plus fees." Gordon's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. He typed. A printer hummed behind him like a distant hive. He returned with a neat stack and a ballpoint pen I didn't take. "Here are the disclosures, the lien filing, the fee schedule and the repayment terms," he said, sliding them toward me. "Auction eligibility begins day 35. Full payoff to release claim, 48.5, assuming no additional interest accrues." I read fast, the way you read a map when you're already late. The edges of the pages were sharp. I could have sliced a finger and it would have been on theme. "Where's the signature page?" I said. He flipped to the back. There it was. My name written in a hand that was 98% mine. The last letter curved down instead of up. Whoever had practiced had done it from a memory, not from muscle. I took my driver's license from the counter and put it next to the page. My signature there looked like me. Decisive, a quiet uptick at the end as if my name could lift off the paper. The pawn's signature was close. Close isn't the same. That isn't my signature, I said. Not loud. I didn't need loud. Gordon stared for a second longer than a trained neutral expression should. Ma'am, if you're alleging fraud, I'll need to get my manager. Please do, I said. And while you're back there, pull the security footage for the transaction. You'll want to queue up the timestamp. I was in Rotterdam that day. Plane ticket and hotel invoice in the folder if you need to confirm. He blinked once. I'll be right back. When he left, the air freshener seemed to double down. I watched my reflection in the glass of a display case. Hair pulled back like a promise, blazer crisp enough to stand on its own. A kid handed his mother a video game controller from a bin and said, "Can we get it, please?" She said, "Not today, sweetheart," and the apology in her voice was the same tone my mother used when she wanted me to be the reasonable one. The manager wore a tie that tried to be cheerful and failed. He shook my hand like it was a contract. "I'm Mr. Laird," he said. "We've reviewed the file. If your identity was used without authorization, that's a police matter. We can place a temporary administrative hold on initiating auction proceedings, 5 business days, while law enforcement is contacted." He placed a small clipboard on the counter with a box labeled "Police Report Filed" next to a blank square. The word police traveled through my body like a siren. I had said it to my family yesterday and meant it. It was different saying it to a stranger who would write it down. "Put the 5-day hold," I said. "I'll decide within 48 hours whether to file. In the meantime, I want copies of the footage and a written statement that you've been put on notice of a signature dispute." He nodded, already reaching for the right form. "There's a $20 duplication fee for the footage." Of course there was. I paid it. He handed me a receipt. I tucked it into the manila folder, which was getting heavier by the second. Outside, the sun had the white-hot quality of bad fluorescent lighting. I sat in the rental with the engine off and let my forehead rest against the steering wheel until I could breathe without counting. Then I drove home, the folder buckled into the passenger seat like a silent, judgmental friend. On my coffee table, I spread the documents in rows the way I lay out freight schedules. Timeline, actors, risks, contingencies. Title application. Lien notice. Fee schedule. Auction window. Footage request. The page with the forged signature sat in the center, a little piece of theater where someone pretended to be me and did it almost well enough to win an award. The apartment was too quiet, so I opened the old photo box I pretend I don't keep. Picture after picture pressed like leaves under plastic. Lucas's 12th birthday with rented go-karts in the cul-de-sac. My 12th, a homemade brownie and a single candle because I had a math competition in the morning. Lucas's high school graduation with the rented party tent. My college graduation with 2 empty chairs because my parents' flight had been delayed. A Christmas where he stood next to a used BMW with a red bow they couldn't afford, and I held a sweater I had bought myself and tried to make my smile do the work my mother's compliment should have. I closed the box. Enough history. History is why people excuse the present. My phone lit with a calendar reminder for a one-on-one with Director Chin. I considered canceling. I didn't. I walked into his office at 2 on the dot, sat straight, and delivered Rotterdam's post-close checklist like someone who slept beautifully and had no pawn ticket with her name on it. He listened with that managerial calm that has saved more careers than pep talks. "You look exhausted," he said when I finished. "Do I need to reassign the Antwerp onboarding?" "I've got it," I said. "Some family stuff is loud right now. It won't touch the numbers." He didn't press, which I appreciated and resented equally. "Keep your hours sane," he said. "Close out the week and then take Friday. Non-negotiable." Back at my desk, I added Friday to a list titled Things I Can Control. By 5, the pawn shop had emailed a download link to the footage. I watched on my laptop in a still frame that made my mouth go dry. My father at the counter, hat in hand. My mother behind him, lips pressed into a line that meant she had decided to be brave at the wrong task. Lucas off to the side, focused on his phone, lips moving as if he were rehearsing how he'd pitch the boutique to someone who didn't know him. The manager slid the signature page across. My father hesitated a fraction too long. My mother picked up the pen. He signed my name. She tucked hair behind her ear after, the tell she has when she does something she knows I won't like. Lucas looked up once, saw the pen, saw the paper, looked down. It took 14 seconds. I paused the video and sat back. There are crimes that look like a smash and grab. This was a tea-time felony, soft voices, good intentions, a pen making a line that might as well have been a road they drove across my back. My phone buzzed, jarred by the thud of my own pulse. Marina, dinner? I can bring that spicy noodle place you like. Also, have you eaten anything other than caffeine today? I answered yes to dinner, no to food. In 20 minutes she was there, eyebrow up, 2 paper bags like peace treaties. I told her the story between bites. She listened like a good analyst. Eyes narrow for accuracy, questions sparse but incisive. If a stranger did that, she said finally, you'd already have a police report number. Yes. And because it's your parents, you're negotiating against your own boundaries. Yes. She wiped her mouth, set her chopsticks down. Hey. So set different ones. Your timeline is the pawn shop's timeline now. You need a plan to get the car out before the auction window opens and a plan to make the debt land in Lucas's lap where it belongs. I know, I said. Step 1 is data. Step 2 is leverage. Step 3 is a path they can walk that doesn't include handcuffs, if they choose to walk it. She pointed to my laptop. Step 1 is also proof that Lucas's boutique is a mirage. Otherwise they'll keep believing in a return that will never materialize. I stared at the paused image of my mother's hand on my name. Then I opened a new note, titled it Recovery, and started a list. At 10:12 p.m., after Marina left with the firm promise she'd check on me in the morning like I was a plant she was determined not to let die, I typed coffee. Noon. Bring your business plan. And sent it to Lucas. Bubbles appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Sure. It's more of a creative concept than a plan, he finally wrote. But you'll get it. I didn't answer. I turned off the laptop and the lights and lay in the quiet, listening to the building breathe. I pictured Harborview's clipboard box, empty of the police checkmark, waiting. I pictured my Mustang behind a roll-up door somewhere, patient as a saint. The cut on my thumb from a paper edge stung when I brushed it against the sheet. It was thin and mean and barely visible. Like some betrayals you can only show people if you put the proof in their hands. Noon tomorrow, I told myself. We stop pretending. We talk in numbers. We start the repayment clock. The coffee shop smelled like burned caramel and good intentions. Lucas had claimed a corner table and spread his confidence across it. Glossy printouts of mood boards, a pile of brand-name lookbooks he hadn't paid for, and a leather notebook with nothing written on the first 10 pages. Here, he said brightly when I Saturday, this is the vibe. Vibe, I thought, and kept my face neutral. Great. Now the plan. Supplier contracts. Lead times. Unit economics. COGS per SKU. Target margins. Cash conversion cycle. Break-even month on a 12-month P&L. I paused. Also, your lease. Somewhere behind his eyes a light dimmed. It's more fluid than that. Streetwear is about momentum. Drops, capsules. Numbers, I said. The rent on Harlow and King. The deposit you already paid. Your cash on hand after the pawn. Your marketing budget that isn't go viral. He pushed a single sheet toward me, brand names like Cobalt/Front Street/Heritage sketched in tidy block letters. Packaging ideas. A Pinterest-worthy palette. No vendor signatures. No MOQ. No financing. This is what you stole my car for? I asked quietly. He flinched. I didn't steal it. We borrowed against it. You forged my name, I said. That's not borrowing. That's theft with paperwork. He tried a smile and let it die when it didn't land. I just need a little more to get over the hump. 5-10 grand. The first drop. No, I said. There's no hump. There's a cliff and you're already off it. I slid the sheet back. Here's what happens now. Every cent associated with the pawn, principal, interest, fees, lands on your ledger. Then you repay me for time and cost. Not because I'm cruel. Because I'm done underwriting your rehearsals. He stared at the table. You've always had a safety net. Work, I said. I've always had work. I stood. I'll send you a list of entry-level openings that pay in 2-week increments. A job is not humiliation. It's a bridge you build with your own hands. Outside, the sun had shifted just enough to put shadow on the sidewalk like a stripe I could step over. I stepped. Day 3. A supplier emailed Lucas that wire must clear before shipment. Translation. Someone's credit got cut. He texted me screenshots of DMs saying, "Is this real vintage? Why did the label peel?" I put my phone face down and finalized a rail capacity addendum for Antwerp, the sort of logline that keeps cargo from sitting in a yard and becoming a headline. Day 5. Refunds flooded his payment processor. The account flagged for chargeback risk, then temporary hold. Lucas called twice. I let both go to voicemail. My list on the fridge read: 1. Principal plus fees. 2. Stop auction clock. 3. Make Lucas carry weight. I underlined 3, with a line hard enough to dent the page beneath. Day 7. The landlord's notice: 5 days to cure or vacate. Lucas said he could explain that he just needed breathing room. Breathing room is for lungs. Loans want money. Day 10. The bank froze his boutique account. A photo arrived from Marina, shot from a safe distance. Lucas behind a Nordstrom stockroom door in a plain black tee, name badge crooked, face set to "I'm surviving this." I didn't text him. I didn't not text him. I finished the Rotterdam post-close deck and delivered it to Director Chin on time with a summary slide so clean it could have been a blade. When the apartment got too small for my thoughts, I took out the pawn footage again. I watched my mother sign my name and tuck her hair behind her ear. I watched my father look at his hands. I watched Lucas look down. I memorized the timestamp. I put the laptop away like evidence no one else was allowed to misplace. That Sunday, my mother's pot roast smell met me at the door like an apology that had lost its words. The good china gleamed like we were auditioning for a normal family. My father sat rigid. Lucas arrived late, sunglasses on indoors because denial has a dress code. We ate for a while with the kind of silence knives can cut. "Kendra," my mother began, then stopped. "Wrong universe. Lucas is going through a rough patch with the boutique," she tried again, voice careful. "Everyone fails sometimes." I set down my fork. "This isn't failure. It's theft." Victor's jaw flexed. "We thought we were helping your brother get his start." "At my expense," I said. "And without asking." "It's just a car," my mother muttered, and the sentence tripped every wire I keep buried. "It's 6 years of overtime and 1,000 hours of restoration," I said. "It's a title in my name that you signed. It's the thing that taught me to own something I built. And you sold it for a mood board." Lucas's voice came from behind the glasses. "I said I'd pay it back." "You'll repay every cent," I said. "But not because you made a promise while sitting in a chair someone else bought. Because there will be a structure that doesn't care about your personality." The doorbell rang. My father looked almost grateful to stand up. A moment later, Uncle Rafi filled the doorway, broad shoulders, oil-stained memory in the lines of his hands, though he retired 5 years ago. "Evening," he said like he'd been invited, which he had not. He nodded at me first. "Kid." "Rafi," I said, and some knot between my ribs loosened. He took in the table, the plates, the way no one was breathing. "Heard the words 'family helps family' used to justify a felony," he said conversationally as he pulled out a chair. "Figured I'd come see." Elaine's spine went iron. "This is a family matter." "Then I belong here," he said simply. "What's the plan to fix what you broke?" Everyone looked at my father. Victor looked at his hands again. I looked at the man who taught me how to torque a bolt without snapping it. I reached down, lifted the manila folder I'd brought, and placed it on the table next to the gravy boat. Paper whispered. I flipped the cover back and laid out 3 stacks like a dealer who only plays with face-up cards. "Stack 1, I said. "Vehicle title, lien notice, pawn fee schedule, auction window. Harborview can auction on day 35. Full payoff is 48.5 plus daily accrual." I tapped the second stack. "State statutes. Title fraud. Identity theft. Penalties. Fines plus 2 to 5 years depending on the judge, the jurisdiction, the mood in the room." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I tapped the third. Options. Administrative hold we already triggered. 5 business days. A larger hold if I file a police report and the detective calls Harborview. Or, and this is the only path where no one wears cuffs, you assemble the full amount before the auction clock dings, then sign a legally binding repayment agreement to me with an interest rate slightly below predatory and a default clause that files itself. No one reached for a potato. The house clicked and ticked, settling around our new facts. My mother's eyes shimmered. "Daphne." "No analogies," I said. "No stories. Paper." Numbers. Uncle Rafi leaned in, forearms on the table like a man who has negotiated with breakdowns before. Let's be clear, he said, looking at Lucas. This debt is yours. Lucas pushed the sunglasses up onto his head and suddenly looked 28 instead of invincible. I know, he said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Not charm, wait. I know. Victor lifted his chin a fraction. We can try for a helic, he said. We're not young, but the house is mostly 2 weeks to fund if you're lucky, I said. Auction window laughs at 2 weeks. Rafi pointed at the stacks. What stops the auction longer than 5 days? I slid a single sheet form across. The little square next to police report filed looked like a dare. This, I said. And you don't want me to check it. No one moved. In the quiet, I could hear my own pulse and the soft scrape of Lucas's thumb against the table edge like he was memorizing wood grain. Tomorrow, I said at last, we start with a deposit to pause the auction. A large one. 15,000. I'll front 5 for the sake of the metal I love, not the people who took it. The rest comes from selling things you can live without. Jury. The lease on the German vanity car. Whatever is sitting in closets earning dust instead of interest. Elaine swallowed. Those are family heirlooms. So is my title, I said. You can have back the pearls when I have back my name. Rafi's mouth twitched into something like approval. I'll put in 5, he said. Not because anyone deserves it. Because the car does. And because Daphne doesn't pay for theft. Victor looked at him, then at me. Then we're at 10, he said, voice low. I'll find the other 5. Good, I said. And Lucas, tomorrow you start a job that deposits into an account with my name on joint oversight. Every paycheck, a chunk comes off the number on this page. I tapped the top of the pawn math. Every cent. He nodded once, not in defiance. In agreement with gravity. I gathered the stacks, squared their edges until they aligned like a promise you can measure. Then I placed the manila folder at the center of the table where a centerpiece would go in a family with fewer fires. We're done pretending, I said. We're done calling a mood board a financial plan and a forged signature a misunderstanding. I looked at each of them one by one. We either walk the lawful path I drew or I check that box and let the state drag you down a different road. No one reached for the gravy. No one reached for me. The house made a settling noise like a ship shifting in a storm. Tomorrow morning, I said, standing. Bank opens at 9. I slid the folder toward the middle of the table. Paper skimmed wood. Plates gleamed. A clock in the hall ticked into the space where every excuse used to live. And then I said the only sentence left. We need to talk about what happens next. Morning made everything look solvable the way neat light can turn a disaster into a checklist. At 8:57 a.m. I stood outside the credit union with my father and mother on either side like mismatched bookends. Lucas hovered half a pace back, hands jammed in his pockets as if he could hide the fact that they were empty. We're doing this in parts, I said. 1. Deposit to stop the auction clock. 2. Map every source of cash with dates, not dreams. 3. You start paying me back the second your first paycheck clears. Victor nodded like the word dates was a language he wished he'd learned earlier. The doors unlocked with a magnetic sigh. We went in. Cashier's checks are prettier than money. They look like certainty. By 9:22 we had $10,000 from my account, $5,000 mine, $5,000 from Uncle Rafi wired late last night, and $5,000 from my parents' savings that had been sitting for emergencies, that apparently didn't include their daughter's name on a title. Harborview title and pawns smelled the same, citrus and a faint note of metal. Gordon didn't flinch when I slid the checks across. He counted, stamped, and typed. Mr. Laird appeared from the back like a clause you forgot to read. Large principal payments allow us to place an active redemption hold, he said, tapping the screen. That pauses auction consignment for 10 business days. He printed a form and used a highlighter with the practiced air of a man who had explained this 1,000 times. Hold through, 10/14. Balance due, $33,512.40. Interest ticking like a second hand. I traced the date with my eyes. It wasn't comfort, it was a line in the sand. I need a stamped receipt, I said, and an update showing principal reduction and the new balance. And I want your policy in writing that you won't move to auction before that date. You now have it, he said, sliding the papers to me. Is Ty tried for cheerful again? Failed again. Outside, Lucas exhaled like someone had removed a weight from his chest without asking if he deserved the relief. So we're good, he said. No, I said. We bought time. Time isn't payment. At my parents' kitchen table, now a war room, I spread a Google sheet printed hard on paper because some lessons require ink. Sources and uses in a header that meant business. Sources, I said, tapping each box. Helek. You apply today. If it funds at all, they'll quote 10 to 14 business days. That's outside our hold. Don't rely on it. Lucas, sell the C-Class. Private sale nets more, but a dealer pays now. Mom, jewelry and the silver. Dad, night shift differential. Small but adds up. Uncle Rafi, already in. Me, no more than what I've committed. We do not move my retirement to solve a theft I didn't commit. Elaine flinched on theft but didn't fight the word. That was new. Victor rubbed a thumb over the table's varnish. I can talk to Sal at the warehouse, he said. Nights start next week. It's been 22 years. You'll sleep during the day and skip yelling at me about vitamins, Elaine said quietly, a reflexive attempt at humor that fell short and then faded. I'll box the pearls in Grandma's candlesticks. The pawn on Fletcher pays less than they're worth, but it's cash, I said. This week. Lucas swallowed. I'll take the car to Crestline today, he said. They'll lowball me, but it clears the note and leaves something. His voice cracked like a cheap plate. He steadied it. It's mine to lose. He looked at me, then really looked. Not at the version of me he'd trained himself to see, solid, useful, ignorable, but at the person who had put her name under the weight of her own work. I'm sorry, he said. Not a performance. A sentence with its pockets turned out. Start with action, I said. The apology will keep. By noon the house was a relay. Elaine wrapped heirlooms in tissue with hands that trembled but didn't pause. Victor sat with a loan officer named Winters at the credit union, answering questions that were really math problems dressed as personal inquiries. Lucas drove to Crestline in a car he'd polished that morning out of habit, as if shine could change a number in a dealer's head. I went to work. Director Chin signed off on my Antwerp addendum with a simple, clean. He didn't ask about Harborview, he didn't need to. I was hitting numbers, which is the only apology business understands. At 3:16 p.m., texts stacked like freight cars. Elaine. Fletcher's offered $2,900 for pearls plus silver. It hurts, but I did it. Receipt in the envelope. Victor. Night shift approved. Starts Monday. Helek in underwriting. Winter says 3 to 5 days for appraisal, then maybe a week for funding. He looked sorry while he said it. Not helpful. Lucas. Crestline wrote a check for $12,400. It's insult, but it's today. I walked home. It was long. I moved their numbers from projected to cleared and recalculated. Remaining balance, $18,212.40, with interest accruing like a metronome. A doable number in a world where doing had replaced wishing. At 6:03 p.m., Marina dropped by with supermarket sushi and the kind of grin you get when a plan survives contact with reality. Heard you got the hold, she said, toeing off her shoes. Also heard Lucas is wearing a name badge at Nordstrom. The stockroom, I said. It's real work. Good, she said, stealing a piece of salmon from my tray. Every family needs a flu shot against magical thinking. That night I watched the pawn footage one more time and did something I hadn't allowed myself. I paused not on my mother's hand signing my name, but on the frame where my father's face changed. It was subtle. The moment intention curdled to consequence. Watching it, I felt anger and, beneath it, a grief for all the times he taught me to do the right thing and then failed to apply the lesson to himself when it meant telling my brother no. I didn't forgive him. I didn't harden either. I filed the feeling under facts. Then I drafted the repayment agreement, headers, amortization, defaults. Because if this ended without cuffs, it would only be because paper stood where boundaries used to collapse. The next morning began like progress and ended like a phone ringing in a quiet room. By 9:40 a.m., Elaine texted a photo of an empty velvet jewelry tray and a thumbs up that was more stoic than cheerful. By 10:15, Victor forwarded an email. Appraisal scheduled. Thursday 2 p.m. Lucas sent a picture of his Nordstrom schedule. Received orientation packet. Starts tomorrow. Breaks are timed. He added, I thought I was tired when I was building a brand. Turns out I was just loud. I smiled. A small, unbeautiful thing but mine. At 11:06 my phone lit up with Harborview, Laird. I answered on the second ring. Ms. Morales, he said, managerial cordial, calling as a courtesy. We've had an interested party contact us about the Mustang. My grip tightened on the phone. Interested party. A private buyer, he said. Knows the car. Offered to redeem in full. I stared at the spreadsheet on my table until the numbers blurred. You can't sell while an active hold is in place. We're not moving to auction, he said, and I could hear the italics. But redemption is not an auction. First full payoff to the penny and release of lien wins the vehicle. Our system doesn't privilege the original borrower once default is in play. I am not in default. I said, careful and flat. I am in active redemption with a stamped hold. You are, he said. Which is why I'm calling you first. Policy is simple. First money here gets the car. We'll honor your hold through the date on your receipt, but if the other party arrives with certified funds prior to your payoff, we can't refuse them. The world narrowed to the size of a check. Who is it? I asked. I can't disclose that, he said smoothly, the way people do when they've said it too many times to feel anything about it. I will say they sounded motivated. Of course they did. Mustangs collect admirers the way trouble collects interest. How long do I have? I asked. He paused. They said they were arranging funds today. He didn't say hurry. He didn't have to. Thank you for the call, I said, which was code for you've told me nothing and everything. When I hung up, the apartment went so quiet I could hear the pen in my hand click as my thumb moved without my permission. I looked at the remaining balance number and then at the calendar. 10 business days is a luxury if you're the only one racing. I called my father. We have to move, I said. Now. What happened? Someone else wants the car. Laird says first full payoff through the door gets it. Silence. Then Victor's voice, something hard rebuy its way through it. We won't let that happen. You have 48 hours, I said, inventing a deadline because sometimes you have to name the clock to make it start. After that we're at the mercy of a stranger's cashier's check. I hung up and stared at the keys on my counter. The rental's fob, my apartment's brass, the Mustang's tag on a ring with nothing to attach it to. I set the pen down so it would stop clicking. Across town, a pawn shop door would jingle when the right person pushed it. I intended to make sure that person was me. The phone lit again. Unknown caller. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. A buyer is minutes from redeeming your car. How would you beat the clock, and after the apologies would you forgive, sue, or put it in writing? Harborview called. Someone else was ready to redeem my '69 Mustang in full. Policy was simple. First money through the door wins. We moved. Cashier's checks, consignment cash, overtime advances. Ugly but immediate. Uncle Rafi bridged the last gap under one condition. Everything would be repaid on paper. At the counter I slid checks while the wire ticked across the system. The door jingled. Another buyer, leather folder in hand. We all watched the screen. 11:42. Posted. Balance 0. Lien released. The other buyer nodded and left. I took the keys, cold, familiar weight, and drove the Mustang home. It didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like oxygen. Sunday dinner looked like peace but sounded like court. Dad, I failed to protect what mattered. I'm sorry. Mom, I signed your name. I'm sorry. Lucas. Budget, schedule, first payment date. For once, math instead of charm. I met attorney Rachel Holman. I could press charges and win. I chose something stricter. A repayment and restitution agreement. Readable. Enforceable. 24 months, fair interest, wage assignment for Lucas, stipulated judgment filed automatically on default. Mom and Dad co-sign joint and several. No cuffs unless they stop paying. We signed at the same kitchen table where they defended family helps family. This time the help had consequences. Copies slid across. Nobody argued, the ink did that job. Practicalities followed. I changed the garage code. Installed a separate alarm in the Mustang. No spare key left just in case. Lucas sent the first transfer. Small, real, on time. Another came 2 weeks later. Rhythm matters more than drama. Dad's night shift differential hit. Mom's budget spreadsheet had columns and zero excuses. The helic went where it should have gone on day one. To clean their own mess, not mine. At the next family barbecue, Aunt Patricia tried to minimize it. Everyone makes mistakes. Until Rafi said, no minimizing. Lucas owned it out loud. Favoritism, manipulation, repayment. The room finally learned to listen. On a clear morning I took the canyon road. Windows down, engines steady, boundaries holding. Later I led my workshop for young women. Cash flow, contracts, collateral, the sanctity of a signature. A girl traced the Mustang's fender with her eyes and said her mom once sold her dad's tools for dance lessons. I handed her the keys long enough to sit behind the wheel. Dreams need protecting, I said. And so do you. Driving home I passed my parents. Dad had built a locked bay just for the Mustang, keypad known only to me. He didn't ask for a spare key. Mom asked if I wanted tea, small, respectful. Some people think the story ends when you get the thing back. It ends when you draw the line and keep it. In ink, in habits, in who holds the keys. Sinudidin. Bertik daha uzun olsun. ChatGPT. It's boyunca disundum. Part 5 to 6. Wire and boundaries. Slightly extended. Question. A buyer is minutes from redeeming your car. How would you beat the clock, and after the apologies would you forgive, sue, or put it in writing? Harborview called. A private buyer was arranging full redemption on my '69 Mustang. Policy there is blunt. First money through wins. We mobilized. Cashier's checks, consignment cash, overtime advances. Fast, imperfect, real. Uncle Rafi bridged the last gap on one condition. Everything gets repaid on paper. At the counter I slid checks. The wire was in flight. The bell jingled. Another buyer, leather folder in hand. We all watched the clerk screen. 1142. Posted. Balance 0. Lien released. The other buyer nodded, fair, and left. I took the keys, cold, familiar weight, and drove the Mustang home. Not fireworks. Oxygen. Sunday dinner looked like peace, sounded like court. Dad, I failed to protect what mattered. I'm sorry. Mom, I signed your name. I'm sorry. Lucas. A notebook, not a pitch. Budget, schedule, first transfer date. Math instead of charm. I met attorney Rachel Holman. I could press charges and win. I chose stricter mercy. A repayment and restitution agreement. 24 months, fair interest, wage assignment for Lucas, stipulated judgment auto-filed on default. Parents as joint and several co-signers. One clause mattered most. No criminal complaint so long as you comply. Break it and I file, civil and criminal. We signed at the same kitchen table where family helps family once excused a felony. This time help had consequences. Rafi witnessed. Copies slid across. Nobody argued. The ink did the talking. Practicalities replaced speeches. I changed the garage code. Installed a standalone alarm in the Mustang. No spare key just in case. Lucas set up auto transfer. A percentage of every paycheck into the trustee account Holman manages. First receipt hit. Small, on time, repeatable. 2 weeks later another. Rhythm drama. Dad's night shift differential posted. Mom's new budget had columns and dates, not wishes. The helic finally funded and went where it should have on day one. Their balances, not mine. At the family barbecue Aunt Patricia tried to smooth it over. Everyone makes mistakes. Rafi, no minimizing. Lucas owned it out loud. Favoritism, manipulation, repayment, so everyone else finally shut up and listened. A small load-bearing shift. I kept my side of the deal too. No charges. Clear boundaries. I moved the Mustang into a locked bay Dad had built. Separate alarm, keypad only I know. He didn't ask for a spare key. Mom asked softly, T? Respect sounds like small verbs. On a clear morning I took the canyon road. Windows down. Engine steady. Boundaries holding. Later in my workshop for young women we talked cash flow, contracts, collateral, and why a signature is sacred. A girl traced the Mustang's fender with her eyes and told me her mom once sold her dad's tools for dance lessons. I let her sit behind the wheel. She straightened her back like a decision. Dreams need protecting, I said. And so do you. Driving home, the rear view held my parents framed by the open garage. People learning slowly to live on the right side of a line. Some stories end when you get the thing back. This one ends when you draw the line and keep it. In ink, in habits, and in who holds the keys.